Welcome, seventh graders, to our second lesson on photosynthesis. Today, we are going to pick up where we left off. Since our bulb and our projector is not working today, I decided to go on YouTube and post a video for you guys so we could finish our lesson today. I'm actually going to start at the beginning since I have this screen-o-matic going. It'd be a little hard to kind of pick up where we left off, so it will be a good review anyway for you. Remember that at any time, if you need to go back into the presentation, just start or stop the presentation and jot down notes or whatever it is you need to finish before moving on. And if you have questions, please raise your hand and I'll come around and help you out. So, just to get started, yesterday we talked about how plants and animals are different. This is the first thing we got to understand when talking about photosynthesis. Yesterday we discussed that plants are organisms that make their own food and that animals cannot make their own food. So in kind of scientific terms, we say that a plant is an autotroph and an animal, or an organism that can't make its own food, is a heterotroph. They rely on other things. And this is kind of what we're going to focus on today with the plants, is how they obtain that food and how they make that food for themselves. So sources of energy. Again, yesterday we talked about your calculators and taking your finger and covering that little solar panel on top, and you guys saw that when we did that, the numbers on the calculator eventually just kind of faded away. That's showing that the lights in this room are actually giving energy to something like the calculator, much in the same way a plant receives its food from sunlight. So photosynthesis, kind of the baseline discussion for today, is the process by which a cell captures energy in sunlight and uses it to make its food. And there's going to be a couple of steps that we're going to talk about today and how plants do that. And at the bottom here, I just starred kind of an important term because people are always like, well, why do we need to know photosynthesis? Well, if we think about it, nearly all living things obtain energy either directly or indirectly from energy of sunlight captured through photosynthesis. So there's a very, very, very small percent of organisms in our planet that don't actually use the sunlight in some way to survive. Even humans need it. So it is pretty important. Today we had a chance to look at the solar car and how something as simple as panels got the car going almost 55 miles an hour. So there's a lot of energy that can be captured from our sun. Store their food in two different ways. First one is sugar. If we've ever eaten on some type of fruit before, we notice that they're typically very sweet and they're very good. Sugar is a major form of energy. I think we brought up the example yesterday as well that if you've ever had like a pop or a Monster energy drink, that when you drink those, they're packed full of sugar and you almost get kind of jittery because there's so much sugar being consumed in those that your body really doesn't know what to do with it. And the second form is in starch. Corn is a good example of this. Starch is another compound that is used for food in plants. Okay, so stage one. What part of the plant produces food? So really, in the first stage, we're talking all about the sun. And yesterday when we looked at the Elodia or duckweed plant, we saw the little chloroplast organelles inside of those cells, and we explained that inside those cells we have little pigments of chlorophyll that are actually going to capture that sunlight. So again, just to start from the beginning, we have something called pigment, which are colored chemicals that are used to absorb light. They kind of take that light and they capture it for the plant. And what happens is when we looked at that cell, we had those little photosynthetic synthetic pigments in the chloroplast, which we call chlorophyll. Think of it kind of like a solar cell. Again, our Elodia leaf that we saw, this is just another example, close-up example of what those chloroplasts and chlorophyll actually look like. So again, the chlorophyll in the cells absorb the energy from the sun. I kind of like to think of this as, think back to that solar car we saw yesterday. It's gathering all that energy and it's storing it. It's kind of like a battery for the cell. It's the starting point for that captured energy for the plant. During stage 2, the final stage of photosynthesis, um, we're using energy to actually make that food. The cell uses the captured energy to produce sugars. And again, remember, sugars are our energy sources for our plants. So the cell needs two raw materials for this stage. We talked about raw materials yesterday as being something we don't make as humans. It's something that comes from the earth. And in this case, the two key ingredients here are water and carbon dioxide. So the roots and stomata, how are we actually going to get those raw materials into our plant? The first way we do this is through the stomata. And at the bottom here, you can see we have a picture of a regular leaf on the underside, and this was taken from an electron microscope, and we blew it up hundreds and hundreds of times to see these little stomatas. They actually look like little mouths for the plant. And that's essentially kind of what they are. They're little openings on the underside sides of the leaf that take in carbon dioxide and release oxygen. So they suck in the carbon dioxide, and the second part of photosynthesis is they're going to release that oxygen back into the atmosphere. Okay, so this little diagram again is going to highlight those raw materials with the sunlight, and when it's combined with water, carbon dioxide, and nutrients from the soil, we're left with the first process of photosynthesis. So water plus carbon dioxide and soil is going to give us our sugar. So the chlorophyll processes the ingredients, those raw materials, and makes the sugar, which is plant food. And kind of a byproduct of this process, again, is we make sugar and oxygen that other organisms can actually use. Like us, we breathe in oxygen. Those of you that have ever been to like a flower shop or maybe bought flowers for somebody, a lot of times at the flower shop, they'll give you little packets of plant food. And essentially what that is, it's just sugar for the plant. And it helps them stay, like flowers, for example, stay bright and healthy for a given period of time. One way I like to think of this process, and kind of we'll put it in your terms, I know some of you are in FACS class right now, is think about baking. The perfect example. When you bake a cake or you bake cookies, wherever you're baking, we have some key ingredients. You know, we have flour, sugar, baking powder, baking soda, eggs, vanilla, whatever the case might be. Sometimes you can get away without using some of these ingredients, but when you're missing a key ingredient like baking powder, for example, we don't get a cake or a cookie that we typically think of. They're really, really flat. So when you have the right ingredients and they're mixed right and they're baked right, we get a cake that we like to eat. That's really, really good. So plants and animals need each other to survive. Here are a couple photos that should show that. Um, we talked about oxygen yesterday in the atmosphere and how important it is for living things uh, to breathe. We need air to breathe, and without plants, which is one of our biggest resources for cycling in that carbon dioxide and oxygen, we wouldn't have a lot of that. So we kind of depend on each other to survive. So animals, including humans, make the CO2. If you breathe out right now, put your hand in front of your mouth, you can feel that carbon dioxide coming out. Plants are kind of opposite of us. They need us to breathe. They need us to take in that oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide so they can essentially breathe in the carbon dioxide. And then kind of contrast to that, the plants, make the oxygen and food we need. This next slide is just showing an equation. When you guys get into chemistry, this will probably make a little more sense, but I just wanted to show you this. But we can really think of it kind of as an equation. So the molecules that enter the plant, kind of like the raw materials that we talked about, the water, the carbon dioxide and the nutrients from the soil, when they're all mixed with sunlight, they produce a byproduct, or they produce a cookie or a cake. So glucose is considered sugar, and then we have oxygen. Energy is a cycle that starts with the sun. Plants use the energy from the sun and create food through photosynthesis. So really, if we want to break this down, one of the most important things in our world is the sun. And as you know, science gets better with figuring some of these things out with energy and how to conserve energy. This is a big thing right now for green energy and how to be more environmentally friendly. But just take a look at this diagram and it kind of shows a very basic process of photosynthesis. All right, well, that about wraps up our presentation for today. Like I said before, if you need to go back into the presentation, please do. The last thing I want to show you guys, we talked about color yesterday and how color is kind of a weird thing to our eye. There's a really cool video on YouTube that if you want to take a look at, I think it's worthwhile. You can use, you're not going to be able to click on this hyperlink, but you can pause the video and type it into your search bar and pull it up. It's a Vsauce video, and he kind of explains what pigment is and why we see color. And what I want you to do is at the top here, it says, what color is a mirror? Try to figure out what color a mirror actually is. Okay, have a good day. Thank you.